Well, we've been doing this great series on things that attack our hearts, diseases of the spiritual kind that attack our hearts. And we've dealt with a couple of pretty big ones over the last couple of weeks. We've dealt with the fact that when we're guilty, we believe that it's I owe you something. And we've dealt with anger, and anger says that you owe me. And today we want to start unpacking the next part of the series, and it's the part where it says that I don't even remember what it says, that I owe me greed. I owe me. Now, I've never met a greedy person, or at least not a person who would admit that they're greedy. They usually say something like this: I'm rather careful. I'm frugal. I pinch pennies. Greed often hides behind some really great virtues like saving for a rainy day, planning for the future, being cautious with my investments. These are all good things unless they're motivated by greed. Now, greedy people believe that they deserve that every good thing that comes their way. They believe they deserve it. They also believe that they deserve every good thing that could possibly come their way. And that's one of the keys of knowing whether or not you're greedy, is do you believe that you should get it all? You know, greedy people usually have a story they like to tell, much like angry people. Something has happened, and as a result of that, they want to make sure that they're never put into a place again where they're without the things of this world. And they usually hide their greed pretty well, rather successfully from themselves, but rarely from anyone else around them. In fact, if you'd like to know how to identify whether or not you're a greedy person, let me give you some suggestions. Greedy people are this: they talk a lot and worry a lot about money. They're not cheerful givers. They're poor losers. They quibble over insignificant sums of money. They talk as if they've just lost, they just have enough to get by, and often create a culture of secrecy around them. They won't let you forget that what they have done for you. And they're reluctant to express gratitude. And they're not content with what they have. In fact, they attempt to control people with their money. That sound like any of you? Or anybody you know, perhaps? Maybe we should put it that way. Sound like anybody you know? I have relatives that fit some of those bills. Yeah, they're amazing folks to be around. They never have enough. It's never good enough. They're always concerned about whether or not they need more or not. In fact, there's some questions we could ask ourselves, because greed ultimately is not a financial issue, it's a heart issue. And so here's some questions you should ask yourself. Is it hard to give away your money? Are you quick to make excuses? Do you ask questions to make you look like a careful steward, but in reality, you're looking for an excuse not to give? And when you give, do you believe the recipients owe you something in return? Are there strings attached to your gifts? Don't you just love it when people give you something and they expect something in return? It's really quite a wonderful gift, isn't it? Hi, I love you so much. I'm going to give you this out of the goodness of my heart. Now, you owe me. And I'm going to remind you over and over and over again. It happens so frequently, doesn't it, with some of our lives? People help us out, and we're really appreciative of it, but then from then on, they kind of constantly nudge us or remind us that we need to do something for them because of what they did for us. Do you ever come across that? Do you ever feel that way? I know I do occasionally. That's why I don't like taking money from various relatives, because sometimes you feel like there's strings attached to it. You can't be your own person, you know. Kind of goes with he who has the gold makes the rules. Yeah. Well, Luke 12:15 says this, that when then he said to them, watch out and be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Man's life does not consist of the abundance of his possessions. Do you notice that it says, watch out? Hey, be careful. There's something really important here you need to know. Be careful. Be on your guard. Watch. Don't get caught. It's important. It really is, because there's all kinds of greed, and it isn't what you have that makes your life successful. This is perhaps the most subtle of all greed, because it's so easily disguised as other things. You know, the lie is that my stuff is my life, that he who has the most toys wins. Well, did you click it up there, guys? Cross out the wins and put still loses. He who has the most stuff still. At the end of your life, does it matter how much you have? Not really. And we're going to talk about that. In fact, if you want to turn in your Bible and follow where we're going to be headed, eventually we're going to be headed to Luke 12. But just to let you know, that's where we're headed, all right? So fear is the driving force behind greed. Rules greed. Greed is supported by an endless cast of what-ifs. You ever play the what-if game? I'm sure you have. You think about the fact that there's something that would be really great if you could support or take care of or help to do something with maybe someone that's in need or maybe the church. And then you play, but what if I don't have enough money to live out the rest of my life? What if I give and God doesn't take care of me? After all, isn't that what we're really thinking about? Isn't that really where it's at? Because we're really not sure we can trust God? My kids are champion level players of the what-if game. And you'd lay down a rule and they'd want to play the what-if. Well, Dad, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And what about, and every time you answered it, there was always another what-if? I'm sure those of you that are parents have occasionally played that game. I finally stopped playing it. I said, no, I don't play the what-if game anymore. Because we don't know what if. What-ifs never end. We're always looking for a legal loophole, or we're fearful about what it is. And we fear that God either can't or won't take care of us. Isn't that right? Ultimately where it is, we really fear that, or if he does choose to take care of it, it won't be in a way to which we would like for it to be. Isn't that the other part? I know that's my way. I keep telling my kids that when I get older and they get into their jobs, I've got one that hopefully is going to be a lawyer, assuming that she passes the rest of her schooling and she gets passes the bar. And then I've got one that's going to be a molecular genetics and microbiology professor, and I don't know where or a doctor, and I don't know where she's going to do, but I'm hoping she works in the secular world just because it'll make a lot of money. And I keep telling them that when I get old and get ready to retire, I expect for them to take care of me in to which a manner I have not yet become accustomed to. And perhaps that'll happen and perhaps it won't. I don't know. Probably not. But the thing is that we just feel that we can't trust God to take care of us the way we think we want him to. I'm going to diverge just quickly from the message. Is that all right, guys in the back? I'll get back to you. Okay, Sam gave me the thumbs up. I was thinking about this. Look at 1 Peter chapter, I think it's chapter 5 and verse 7. Let's start in verse 6. It says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time." And then look at verse 7. "Cast all of your anxieties, all of your anxiety, cast it on him because he cares for you." In other words, cast everything you care about, cast it on him. You have a need, put it in God's hands. You have a concern, put it in God's hands. Why? Because it says he'll take care of you. We have a tendency not to do that, do we? Don't we? We want to keep all of our cares and our concerns to us. We don't want to share them with God because we really don't trust God, do we? Isn't that what it's just to take care of? In fact, look at this. Look at Philippians 4, and many of you probably know this verse. In verse 19, and it says in Philippians 4:19, it says, "And my God will meet all of your needs according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus." Isn't that a great verse? Don't we like to quote that? I think it's pretty great that we like to quote that. And my God will meet all of your needs according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus. Do you know what goes on before that verse? It says here that it's talking about giving. It's talking about giving to people that need gifts, that need help. And Paul says this. He says in verse 18, I have received full payment and even more. In other words, the gift that they gave, that the people of Philippi gave to him, I've received it. And he says, I'm amply supplied now that I have received from Epaphroditus the gift that you gave. They are what? The gift. This is the gift. They are a fragrant offering, an acceptable sacrifice pleasing to God. I wish I had time to just deal with what acceptable sacrifices are and what New Testament sacrifices are, spiritual sacrifices, but someday we'll deal with that. But look at that. That's what giving is. It's acceptable sacrifices. It's pleasing to God, and it says that as a result of that, God is taking care of all of Paul's needs. Isn't that great? Don't you wish that you could trust God like that in the midst of your struggle? In the midst of your financial concerns? Jesus says, I'll take care of you. I'll take care of you. J. Rockefeller was once asked, and this is the Rockefeller that founded Standard Oil. Okay, this is the big conglomerate, one of the early conglomerates in the early 20th century, and as a result of that, the Congress said, you're too big, you need to split up, and so they split up into multiple different oil companies, and those of you that are older will remember people or companies like Exxon and Mobil and Standard Oil of Indiana. Those were just some of the parts that were broke off of J. Rockefeller's original oil company, Standard Oil of America. And he was the richest man in the world. He was asked, when is it going to be enough? When will you have enough money, Mr. Rockefeller? When will it be enough? And this was his answer. When I get just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. I'm not quite there yet. I'm the richest man in the world, but it's not quite enough. He who has the most toys at the end of their life wins. No, that's not what it says. They lose, doesn't it? They lose. Greedy people are rarely at peace with others, and they're never at peace with themselves. The person whose heart is coated with greed believes that he has earned the good things that come his way and therefore is determined to control his possessions and his wealth the way he sees fit. Greedy people have a supersized sense of ownership. It's mine. Remember the Finding Nemo and the seagulls? Remember that scene? Mine. They have a supersized sense that they own it all. It's theirs. It's no one else's. It's mine. I did it all on my own. Greed is fueled by fear, and once you peel back all of the excuses and the endless but what if scenarios, you discover that you have a person who has a heart full of fear. They just have a hard time trusting God. There's never enough. So acquisition and hoarding and self-indulgence continues. And greedy people often camouflage their greed as virtue. Hoarding becomes saving for a rainy day. Look at Luke chapter 12 and verse 15. We're going to start there and go from there. It says, this is Jesus talking, and he says to them, the people that are around him, he says, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And then it says, then he told them a parable, a story. He wanted to illustrate his point, okay? And so here's the story. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. That's not unusual. We're in the breadbasket of America here, right, aren't we? We have a lot of people that farm. And they produced a good crop. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. And then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store all of my grain and all of my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. Sounds like a drinking song. But God said to him, you fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you, and then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. See, greed can reside in your heart and live there for years undetected. This farmer, it wasn't like it was his first year planting crops. He'd been at it for a while. He had a farm. He apparently was doing, okay. And then one year, the amazing thing happened. Everything that could go right went right. He planted at just the right time. The rains had stopped early enough that it didn't flood the bottomland, And it was just the right amount of sunshine and heat throughout the summer, and the crops grew, and it came fuller and fuller, and the corn got the right tassel at the right time and the right height, and everything was going, and there were no corn, whatever it is that attacks corn. None of those things happened to it. It was just the perfect year, and he was able to harvest at the right time, and it was amazing what happened. And he credited it all to himself. I was so smart this year. I planted it just the right time. I got it just the right. I managed to bring it all in at the right time. I fertilized at the right time. Is that what goes on? The unguarded heart is highly susceptible to this debilitating disease. It's difficult to diagnose and almost impossible to self-diagnose, but Jesus says that a man's life does not consist of the abundance of his possessions. Sure, we all know that, right? Don't you know that? If I were to ask you, is that true? You'd go, oh yeah, Pastor, I know exactly what you're talking about. Val, I know exactly what you're saying. But do we live that way? Or do we live like that's true? I think the problem is we tend to live the opposite of what we say we believe. And being here in the breadbasket of America, it's obviously that the abundance of the harvest has little to do sometimes with the hard work that a farmer puts in, isn't it? Some of you guys have got bottomland, rich bottomland. I bet you planted. This year was absolutely horrible, wasn't it, with all the rain that came? It's hard to get planting in. It was hard last year to get planting in at the right time, and you were kind of wondering, if we get it in, will we be able to bring a harvest in? Will it ripen in time? Farmer already knows that he's at the mercy of many factors over which they have little or no control. But greedy people don't see the world that way. They see that what comes their way does so because they've earned it. And greedmongers never consider the notion that God might have something to do with what they have. Just a little bit, right? It never even crosses their mind to acknowledge the fact that the extra was a blessing from God. And they never even consider why they were blessed with more. Perhaps God gave them some extra to help his church or to help the needy. They never ask, what does God want me to do with the extra? I got to tell you that there have been times in my life when I've been that guy. I work on a commission. Times I was doing really well, and every once in a while I'd just hit something I hadn't expected. You know what I'm talking about? And it just came in gobs. There were times I never even thought about the fact that God had given me extra. Well, I was willing to tithe on it. After all, that's the right thing to do, right? But do you think maybe God gave it to me for something else? To help his kingdom advance in some way that I never even bothered to consider? I've had to repent of that. I dare say that some of us need to repent of it too. We tend to say, wow, I'm so lucky. Look what I got. Look what God gave to me. This is great. I could do this and I can do that. I can get a new TV that I wanted, that big screen TV, that with all of the bells and whistles, and I can get surround sound, and I can get that new car that I wanted. I don't have to worry about going and getting that one that the clunkers were going to let me buy. No, I can get the one that I really wanted, Because after all, God blessed me beyond what I expected. So it must be for me because I'm so good. Right? Should we pass the offering plate around again? This guy had BBS, bigger barn syndrome. It was big, it was bold, it was great. And the problem was that it's a common malady that damages our heart so greatly. Greed always looks good when it hides behind something else. The story doesn't end there. Did you notice that? The story doesn't end there. It says that he needed to plan ahead, and he was planning ahead. He was building extra barns. He didn't just plan ahead enough. That was the problem. He assumed that the abundance of his stuff equaled the abundance of time. And he ran out of time before he ran out of stuff. It turned out the farmer was more dependent on God than he realized. He was entirely dependent on God. He was entirely dependent on God not only for his stuff, but for his time. Too bad he didn't realize that, huh? What about you and me? Do we recognize the fact that our time is dependent upon God and that our stuff is dependent on God? See, it doesn't matter if someone gets all your stuff. It matters when and how, because if someone's going to get your stuff, you're not going to live forever. No one goes, well, unless you were a pharaoh or maybe one of the emperors of China or something, you bury a lot of wealth with you. But after all, it's still down there. After they dig it up, they find it all, right? So you didn't actually take it with you anyhow. You don't get to take the stuff with you. So what are you going to do with your stuff? You can use it for yourself, or you can use it for God. You can say, God, what do I need to do with the stuff that you've given me? Jesus gives a warning, and this is how it will be for people who store up things for themselves but are not rich towards God. By the way, Jesus' definition of a greedy person is a person who stores up things for himself but is not rich towards God. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, it's really easy to understand this. Being rich toward God is kind of Jesus talk about being generous towards those in need and towards his ministry. Greedy person is a man or woman who saves carefully but gives sparingly. I have to constantly work at being generous. I really do, because it's not my nature. My nature is to want to spend it on me. My nature is that I want to collect stuff. I like stuff, And I always find ways of explaining why I need more stuff. When in reality, I really don't. I just want it. The real moral of the story is this, that those whose eagerness to store up material goods outpaces their willingness to give will suffer a complete and total loss when their time runs out. The farmer suffered a total reversal of fortune at death. He lost everything in this life and had nothing to show for it in the next. He didn't just lose his life, he lost everything he considered his life. He was rich in this world but poor towards God because everything that came his way he used for his own personal consumption. Jesus said the farmer is a fool. A fool that most of us would envy because of his possessions and his position and his power. You know, we tend to want to emulate those people, don't we? But Jesus calls them what? A fool. Can you imagine that we're trying to emulate fools? Now, excuse me, some of you will be upset when I use this, but how stupid are you? How stupid am I to want to emulate somebody that Jesus has already identified as being a fool? And we want to be just like him. Oh, man. We want the stuff that they have. We desire it. We're only looking at the immediate, not the future. Jesus says, God says in the story, the rich farm owner's time is up. And he has to stand before God with not a lot to show for it. You see, the farmer was foolish enough to believe that the abundance of his stuff equaled the abundance of his time. He also believed that he was foolish enough to believe that his good fortune was a direct result of his hard work. As though God does not reign on both the just and the unjust. Right? He just reigns on me. It just reigns on my farm. That's the only one. Just, he takes care of me, no one else. And the farmer, the last one, the farmer was foolish not to give from his abundance. I'm reminded of the sketch. Now, those of you that are older, you'll remember this guy. And those of you that are younger, there are some great sketches out there that are old that still have great meaning. Some of you remember a guy by the name of Jack Benny. Remember Jack? Jack was known as being what? Very, very tight with his money. He used to always go down in the vault and count it. And remember, he'd meet his butler or servant or Rochester, that's the guy, yeah. He'd meet Rochester down there. And I can remember as a kid, I don't know if these were reruns or I don't know where I saw this, but I saw this routine one time in which he's talking about how this robber comes up to him. And he says, "Your money or your life?" And you remember Jack Benny. And of course, the robber says, "Come on, your money or your life?" And Jack goes, "Well, I'm thinking about it." Your money or your life? Why is it that we are so easy when we're faced with a mugger today, we're told, just give him your wallet, give him your money. Don't worry about it. Your life is more important. But when it comes to God saying your money or your life, we have to think about it. The story of the rich farmer teaches us two important things. One, it defines the greed from God's perspective. And two, it offers a simple remedy. In conclusion, let me just say this. The first problem is that God's definition of greed is a whole lot broader than yours or mine. And secondly, the second is God's solution is unavoidably practical. We just don't want to do it. You see, the solution to greed, the cure for greed is generosity. It's a habit of being generous. Being generous has the power to free our lives from the guilt and the disease of greed. What are you going to do today? Your money or your life? Which will it be? Let's pray.